the programs. I'm glad you're here to listen to wonderful program coming to you. And please don't forget to subscribe or give us thumbs up. Thank you for watching.
Yeah, welcome to KJ TV, and on the studio we have Dr. Ondimu, and we also have some. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bwana Ireri namna gani?
Salama sana, habari ya daktari?
Mzuri.
Good.
Now, let me see here. Yeah. I thank you for taking your time, and our topic today is Raila'S mass action justified. We are having mass action on Monday in Kenya, and among the things Raila is demanding is Ruto to resign as a president, and also to bring the cost of living down, return of food and fuel subsidies, opening of the IBC servers, and then halting the recruitment of IBC commissioners, that the selection panel illegal and other things. Those are among the things that Raila is demanding to be done. Now, is he really justified? As Kenyans, we are here. Campaign time ended. And now we are Kenyans, and we want to reason together here. Do you think he has substance, Dr. Ndimu? Is it justified?
Yeah. Thank you again for inviting me to your show, and thank you for inviting my brother Sam. I haven't seen him for a while, and I think we should reconnect here and have a cup of coffee. It's been a long time since we physically met, and I'm really happy to see you today. To be honest with you, it's not really justification of mass action or not. In the 2010 Constitution, every Kenyan, wherever they are at, they have a right to picket, to demonstrate, to protest. And that's chapter 4 of the Constitution. I think part 2, if you go read section 37, it's very clear. It says assembly, demonstration, and picketing is a peer of right. Nobody can really stop it. It's enshrined in our Constitution. So in this case, anybody can wake up in the morning and go picket, as long as it's peaceful, as long as you do not destroy anybody's property, as long as you do not do anything. Now, going deeper into the justification of all what you said, I believe the picketing, the demonstrations, and the protests in the 90s brought the freedom we have today. It was because of that, political freedom. And all those 4 things that you mentioned, I think 4 or 5, I think 2 of them really can justify the people to go into the streets and picket. The cost of living is so high, they can go down and say, you know what, we cannot survive. I don't know about you, but I believe I've been receiving calls and people are raising up their hands. I can't asking for help. I need help here, I need help there. I think Kenyans should focus on more about their way of life, the cost of living, than it is the political freedom. Everybody has a political freedom these days. So yes, I would say they are justified, but their focus will not be on opening servers or anything like that, but the cost of living.
Okay, good. Bwana Sam.
Thank you, Dr. Omandi, and thank you for hosting us. I'm also glad to see Dr. Ondimu. It's been a while. He used to be my colleague. We used to work together for the same corporation, and he does great work in the community. So actually, I'll take you up on that cup of coffee. I've been out of corporate for a while, so sisi ni wale two hustlers. I'll take you up on that cup of coffee for sure. But to the great question, is this mass action justified? Actually, Dr. Ndimu did talk a little bit about Article 37 of the Constitution, which is actually correct. The only part I'd correct in that Article 37 there's nowhere that it talks about protest. We know what protests are. They can go either way. So, it says you can peacefully and unarmed, you have the right to assemble, to demonstrate, to picket, and to present petition to authorities, which is completely legal and to the Constitution. But the biggest question on this, Dr. Mandi, when you put this question out to us, is what is the end action, or what is it that Raila and Azimio want to see achieved, right? Marching all the way to State House. To me, it's very clear from history. We've seen how this country has gone. We've seen, how our country, when protests happen, when demonstrations happen, people lose lives, all that. And the three things, the three demands, the high cost of living, the IEBC, and the servers. I'm in agreement with Dr. Ondimo on this one, that, the biggest one here is high cost of living. But does demonstrations and going to State House, the key thing that Raila and Azimio is really looking to bring down the cost of living? Because if we start discussing that issue alone on the high cost of living, Mwananchi made a decision here not long ago, 6 months ago, and they have channels of speaking to that through the elected leaders that they elected, right? And it's very funny to even see these leaders at the forefront saying, hey, high cost of living is, it's way high there, we need it to come down, whereas they have a duty and a mandate from the people for them to figure out how to bring that down. So all these people who are in Azimio calling for that, and their leaders, number one, they don't know their job, because the budget actually goes through Parliament. Before we even see it at Mwananchi, it has gone through Parliament, they've scrutinized it. And if we have not seen them come out and say, hey, this is the suggestions we've done in Parliament, this is what you're trying to do, then they should all resign, and then Mwananchi take power back again, which they are talking about, right? And we tell them, go home packing. So there are ways of addressing these issues. If I touch a little bit on IEBC, we know the process has been out there. The process has been in Parliament. It's been passed through Parliament. Both sides, majority side and minority sides, are represented. If it's about servers, I don't even know why we keep bringing this up, because elections are done at the polling station, right? I was in UDA. I know how we arrange ourselves. By the time elections were coming out in UDA, we already had our elections. Actually, 2 weeks to election, all right, if I tell you the truth, those who are at the core center of our polls, because we had our own polls at UDA that we were conducting, while everybody else, was depending on the newspapers and those polls out there. We already knew how many MPs we're going to have, how many MCAs we're going to have, how many governors we're going to have. We knew how we're going to have to rule the government, because we knew how many people we'll have for us to be in power. So that was already clear to us. That's why you could see Itum become very confidently and say the exact number of votes that we got, and that is what we got. Thank you.
Okay. Now, let's look at, we are just looking at our Kenyans, and we want to be fair. Let's go by items. They are demanding Ruto to resign as a president. That election was stolen. The things we want to be honest, and to put this together, the election was stolen because they got a whistleblower who told them exactly the votes they got. Then opening the servers. I thought the servers were open. To me, I mean, what are really the servers? Is it getting bolts and going to the computer to open inside? Or because exactly the votes which were the president votes from the polling station were directly going to the server, and they were open to the public. I thought that is what it means, opening. What do you understand on that issue, Dr. Ndimu? Is it that the servers were not open?
As I mentioned in my opening statements, honestly, the focus should be elsewhere than the servers, because I do agree with my friend there, Sam, for ones that elections actually are held at the polling stations, and the counting is done at the polling stations, and the tallying is done at the polling stations, and actually, if servers were not at the polling stations, what is transmitted from the polling station to the National Tallying Center goes through the servers. So if I think Azimio is just taking us around, I was supporting them, but I do not support that idea of opening servers. I think if they came up with a tally of the polling station numbers differing from what actually was given out at the National Tallying Center, and then they have a case to really present them Mwananchi. But the question of them saying open the servers don't vote. Really, honestly, let's be honest with ourselves. Servers don't vote. People vote at the polling stations, and the counting is done at the polling stations, and signatures are put at polling stations, and they were given copies of whatever they were given at the polling stations. If they are coming with those hard copies of what they were given that are different from the National Tallying Center, then we can open the servers and say what happened here.
Okay.
In my opinion, again, I rather they focus on the economy than it is anything else.
Okay, thank you.
And for Ruto to resign, as you mentioned there, that's a negotiation tool. When you want to negotiate with your opponent, your competitor, you go for the highest price. Then he will say, you know what, I can't give you that. I can give you this. So that one is justified. Ruto can resign because the economy is not doing well. He gave Kenyans 100 days to bring the economy to the level where everybody can afford stuff. He said in 100 days, 100 days, 100 days. It's now 6 months. I think they are justified to question him and hold him accountable for the promises.
Okay. So, Sam, do we agree that let us not talk about resignation of the president and the opening of server? We take it out of our discussion. That it's not a point we want to discuss.
Completely. Here, this server is just an issue, number one, to rally people around. We know how the electorate in Kenya is. They're not that they're ignorant, but we wait to see an issue that we can clinch on that's on our side for us to kind of try and justify something. The server is very clear. And if I go to even the Supreme Court, which actually, I applaud the Azimio side, they try to follow the right channels of, of trying to dispute the election. They never brought any evidence. The evidence they brought was actually hot air as per the Supreme Court. And actually, Judge Smoking Wanjala asked them a very good question. Give me one from 34A that's very different from what's on the portal, right? That never happened. And so the server issue is just an issue to rally around. So that issue, we can put it on the side. That's a dead issue on arrival. President resigning, that's another issue that we'll also put it on the side. Number one, president was elected by the majority of the people. Yes, there are promises that both sides made. There are promises that from the Kenya Kwanza side that we made. We had goals. And those promises, number one, we have to understand one thing. Even when you go to the counties and you see all the governors too, there were promises that the governors were making, but they get there and they find, guess what? Things are different, okay? And the biggest question to ask about this is, if Raila is honest with people and Azimio is honest with people, they should come up with a scorecard during that period of time until election, right? Where was the cost of living?
Okay.
Let's
wait that one. We are coming on that one. We wanted just to do a elimination.
Okay,
so you agree that we are going to discuss about the resignation of the president, is during office, and the opening of the server is not something we need to talk about.
That is correct.
Now, the next issue I want us to talk about, Azimio is complaining about how the selection panel for going to nominate the commissioners, they have an issue with that. They think it is tilted towards Ruto, because there were 2 people to be chosen from the Parliamentary Service Commission, and we see one from the religious body, I think, and then we have one from Law Society of Kenya, and there is another group I've forgotten.
So the religious parties were 2, I believe, and
religious parties were 2.
Yep.
LSK 1,
yes.
And the PSC 1. What is the other body which was bringing people in? Now, this is where they have an issue. They think Ruto is having 6 out of 7 of these are people who are related to Ruto, and now he's going to manipulate the people who are going to lead the electoral body. That is where they have a concern, because even when they say from parliament, they didn't say either one seat for a majority and one seat from minority. There was nothing like that. So he has appointed his own cronies. That's what the Azimio is alleging. Is there some facts in it? Sam?
That's a very good question, and this is open to transparency. We did see, the good thing nowadays, Parliament of Kenya, it's streamed live, so we can see the debates that go on. We can see how the members of Parliament are behaving, not only just the behavior, but how they're debating their issues.
Yeah.
Out of this, for example, let me start with the LSK, the Law Society of Kenya. Pretty independent, right? They fronted their person. That person got accepted. Let's go to the religious leaders. The religious leaders came up and said, hey, these are the names that we're fronting. We brought that in. The Public Service Commission is where they're saying that's an extension of the executive. But when we look at it sincerely, is at that time, if Raila was in right now ruling, the same thing would happen. The Public Service Commission will still front somebody and they'll come up with that. And that name is discussed in Parliament. And if they have an issue with that name, they should be able to publicly table what issues they have with a certain person. The Parliamentary Service Commission is the biggest issue. They wanted one from majority and one from minority. History has it in our country that every time we're getting to an election, we have coalitions that are formed, right? And every time we have a coalition, it's the interest of that particular election. So let me pose an example here. Azimio, let's say, as minority fronts one name, and we as Kenya Kwanza, we front another name as majority. And come 2027, majority of or even half of the people in Azimio who fronted that name joined Kenya Kwanza coalition. Is that now going to be fair that guess what? Oh, that when we were in Azimio, we fronted this name, but right now this name is biased because they are part of Azimio, which maybe even Azimio is no longer there. Maybe Ruto and Raila joined together as a coalition, and we have another person come up with a different coalition. Are they going to say now this person is biased? Because if we look at it, we have so many, I think 88 political parties, right? So if we were to be fair and say, okay, now the political parties have to come up in front of person, the 88 political parties will all bring different names to the table. All right. So the idea of this on the parliamentary Service Commission to front a name, that is a consequence of what we call I always say elections have consequences. There's a majority and there's a minority in parliament. At one point, when we go to parliament, unless you're able to convince some of the members of parliament in the majority who will be answerable to the public come an election, so they have to debate properly, then we know actually at that time there's nothing pretty much you can do. I'm not saying that is to make you feel like you're just going head on because you have the majority, but it's true. We have the majority. So there's nothing and if you have a name, right? They table a name. They just didn't want the process to go through. That's what happened.
I have a different view about what you said, and you'll be surprised my view. So, and I said this elsewhere before, that the job of an IEBC is the toughest job any Kenyan can really wish to have. Because either way, there's going to be a roost and they're going to point fingers at you. My view is different. It's not really the individual who holds that office that is critical. It's the systems and processes that we have in place that are very critical, that we need to focus on more than even the individuals that are going to hold that office. If we focus on the systems and the processes that really guide the work of that office, then we wouldn't even mind even if it's going to be Raila who is the head of that IEBC, because the outcome will still be the same. If we really focus on that, if we focus on the systems of voting, if we focus on the systems that are going to have the people holding the people accountable for the work they do, then anybody, regardless of who is going to be in that office, the outcome of elections will still be the same. You know why? Yeah. Here in the United States, you and I know that when you walk down to the precincts to vote, you know that your vote is going to count. Why? Is it because of the persons? Have we ever thought about the people sitting behind those desks? They don't even come to mind, because the system has been put in a place in such a way that the person who is actually there in the precincts is not going to be really mattering whether your vote will count or not, because it's the vote that you vote and how you vote and the systems that have been put in place that really count.
Yeah,
so,
but
in my opinion, then we should focus there more than anything else.
But Sam, one of the complaints Asimio is making, when we come to inter-religious parties, inter-religious organization, even that organization did not consult the biggest church. The Catholic Church has denied it. The PCA Church has denied that. So it is a group of some small religious organizations where they say, even one person was saying that it's the wife of Wachawa who nominated those from religious people. I mean, it was somebody talking somewhere. And then, it's a fact. Don't you think it's fair if there were two names from parliament? One could have come from Asimio, and one could have come from the other group. Remember, this is a nominating committee. This panel, the selection panel, is an ad hoc committee to select for IBC. So it will not be there, but IBC will be there for the next 6 years. Don't you think, do we accept that if they have a complaint, they need to sit down and negotiate on this point to avoid this conflict?
So first and foremost, I'm in very much agreement with Dr. Ndimu that when we have institutions and strong institutions that are independent and powered, that this conversation shouldn't even be there. But why this conversation is there is because we have what we call sole losers. Sole losers that every time you lose an election, you should come up with an excuse. Let me give you a good example.
I disagree. No. I'm gonna disagree right there. It's not about the sole losers. It's the systems that are incorrect, that are so weak, anybody can corrupt them. So I don't want to say sole losers in that case. If you heard me correctly, I said because we have this conversation because the systems are so weak that corrupt people can corrupt the people, and the outcome is different.
We lost your sound. We can't hear you.
We lost your sound.
Did you mute?
Okay, there you go. First and foremost thing that yes, Dr. Ndimo has a right to disagree with me on that, but let's begin we agreed on one point, that elections are done at the polling station, right? Yeah. Regardless of who's the chairman of IEBC, who are the commissioners and all that. Elections are done that. So we know if we have an institution that called IEBC, and Kenya is one of the most legislated countries that I can think of. Pretty soon we're going to legislate how people need to walk, right? We have a legislation of how the selection committee is picked. That's a law. We have a legislation on how IEBC is supposed to conduct its elections. How when you walk into that polling station, we have legislation of your first step, what you do when you walk into the polling station until you get out of the polling station. How votes are counted, it's legislation. How a paper gets moved from this person to this other person is a legislation on that. There is a law on how IBC is supposed to tick and certify that. Everything has legislation to it. So yes, I'm in agreement. Whoever sits on there is not an issue. Okay. We have a legislation on how this panel, once it starts to select somebody for that seat or that part, how they have to follow the law to select the person.
So, my friend Sam, do you agree or disagree in any way, either way, that the 4 IAPC commissioners who have been injected out, were they right or they were wrong?
We'll get to that. Let me first finish this.
And the reason why I'm saying that is because the systems are not clear. The systems of operations within IAPC are not so good. That's why those people just walked out. And either they were right or they were correct. I'm not sure.
I'm of a different opinion, because if they were correct, right, number one, they didn't even face the commission that was there. They didn't come to justify their case. They just quit. To me, out of just that, I think they were blatantly lying. They were compromised, and they were trying to figure out how can we go ahead and figure out a way of justifying something that we want to rig for somebody else.
Shouldn't they be held accountable? Shouldn't they be held accountable?
They should be held accountable.
Yes, and that's why I'm saying our systems are not so good. If our systems were well set, and people know the consequences, and they actually see people getting those consequences at the end, they should not be doing what they did.
But
So,
Dr.
so
Ndimu,
wait a
on
minute.
that point,
Oh,
we are
okay.
not done with those commissioners yet. From where I sit on Kenya Kwanza, and from some previous information from where I sit, we are not done with them yet.
Okay,
And
okay.
it shouldn't, and again, it shouldn't be Kenya Kwanza. It should be institutions that are holding them accountable. It's not Kenya Kwanza.
Why I'm saying Kenya Kwanza?
Gentlemen, we are losing. Yeah, I need to say I'm a moderator. So it's good the conversation. You know, we are having a conversation and we want Kenya to move forward. When we are here,
I didn't finish my point. I got interrupted there. I didn't finish my
I'm
point
sorry.
on the process here. Let me just execute that point. So what I was saying is we have legislation on how the selection panel is done. We have legislation on how they are supposed to conduct themselves until we have commissioners. Those commissioners are vetted. All that is documented, right? If we have an issue on any legislation, what do? Let's say Parliament passed a law that is an unjust law, right? What do you do at that moment? The first and foremost thing is we go to court and try to prove our point that when Parliament came up with this law, that's a law right now, it's an unjust law, right? And the courts have a process towards that. So what they could have done is, if they don't like the way the process was done and the process is not justified, we can go to courts for that and try to fix that legislation. If the current members are not willing to change that law, right? So we have all these things. What has happened is...
I know you are giving a lot of detail, but I don't want us to digress from really a point we were talking about the selection panel.
Yes.
I do understand.
And that's why, that's all I'm saying is we have all the selection legislated. So when we go to the churches, for example, the churches, it was very fair. When we go to the churches, for example, we've had rumors that the Catholic Church was not consulted. I have not seen any Catholic person come out outright and say that. I know, like, for example, the senator of Nairobi, what's his name? He's also Sifuna, yes, who's the Secretary General of ODM. He met with one of the Catholic leaders and came back and stated that the Catholic leaders told him that they were not consulted, right? We don't know the truth of that. The church has not come out straight with that and said, guess what? We were not consulted. There is that institution that has been set separate. The only thing that I know that Azimio can stand and say is we, the minority, we are given a chance to front a name, and majority do that. But that process is not anywhere in the legislation. It's an agreement that they can come up to. They are supposed to front a name. Every person fronts a name, and then Parliament goes through those names. At the end of the day, they vote for 2 names to be fronted out there.
Okay. That's enough. Let me remind you here. And we have talked that the only election in Kenya which was never disputed was the 2002 election. And this came out of an agreement we call IBBG. When IBBG, Interparty Group, which agreed the way they were going to constitute the Electoral Commission. Then that is the Electoral Commission which actually conducted the 2002 election, which we say were free and fair. Come 2007, Kibaki ignored the IBBG recommendation and selected the election himself. You see where it brought us to. So, Mr. Nyaga, Kenya, we are a conglomeration of so many interests. We can form a law. A law is sometimes a framework. If it has really come, do you think is it not fair if 2 names were supposed to come from Parliament to give the majority, the other group? In any case, these people, they are not the majority. Even in which Ruto won, he only won by 200,000 votes out of those millions. So which means it was not even 1%. Don't you think it's fair? Where do you live this?
Yeah, I think if you look at it, because we are a conglomeration of so many nations within Kenya and political parties, and there is always, we have a history of unfairness in terms of national resource distribution, and we have a history of a lot of injustice to the poorest of the poor. And how I would wish that we start looking at ourselves as from the lens of the have and the have-nots, then we will not have these many nations and these many political parties. But we are not there yet. So if we look at it from that perspective, I do agree that for fairness sake, that we should be having that representation of minority majority rule. And I'm gonna say this: the people who were registered to vote in the last elections, what 20 million one day,
19.
and 19
Yeah,
something like that. And the winner walked away with 7 million, and almost they were almost even. So there was a population of another 7 million who never voted. So we are looking at a huge chunk of Kenyans who are silent, who perhaps are saying whatever is happening is not what they want. So that's why they never even went down to the polling station to vote. So I do agree with you that if it could have been the most fairest thing to do, and to go back to the 2002 strategy to make a composition of people who are acceptable across the board. But again, without repeating what we have said here, and I know we have a few minutes, the selection of the people who are going to be in that group, it wasn't, in my opinion, fair. Here is why. We cannot differentiate between the church and state in these days. It's one and the same, honestly, because the church and state have gone to bed. Do I trust the church in Kenya today? I don't know, because they never really rise up and point at ills that are happening. So I'm very skeptical if even if the church really selected people, because they are one and the same. They never really, like I just said here, they have turned the churches into political platforms, and it's really a pity.
So let me chime in on this one real quick. I know you've given us some history there, which all that history to me comes to a stop in 2010. 2010, we came up with a new constitution. This constitution was voted by, I believe, almost 60, close to 70% of Kenyans agreed with that constitution, right, at that time. And this constitution has guided us from 2010 up to today. During that period of time, we've seen some things that we never imagined in Kenya could happen because of the constitution that's not biased. First and foremost, we have to agree the constitution is not biased. The constitution is there to fight for each and every right of each and every Kenyan. One of the things that I'll tell you true is our constitution, where if we go back, President Ruto, number one, he had opposed it because he had issues with it. But since it was passed by a majority of Kenyans, he accepted it, right? And that constitution has guided us up to where we are. Going back to this selection panel, every step that has been done was followed per the rules of Kenya, the legislation that's put there and guided by the constitution. All right. The opposition here, and let me call them opposition, they were given a chance. Did they front a name that they wanted? Did they debate a name that they wanted? Did they contribute to the names that we fronted on our end? Right? When we go to church and we say church is in bed with the state, is it because the president or the presidency itself, let me call it that way, that is the president, the deputy president, is it because they're religious? And we have not seen that before, except the era of Moi, but in multi-party, because he's religious and he's accepted by the church, that we're saying now the church is biased. Because I will tell you something, and this might be controversial too. The other day, the Supreme Court came with this ruling of LGBTQ+, right? April, both opposition, the church, the state, everybody went against it. But they followed the law, which is there. And our president, in as much as he opposed that, he said they have spoken. All we can do is task our members of parliament to go and change the rules.
Okay.
Right? To accommodate all the Kenyans. And there's every step, there's laws and regulations for that. So that is done deal. Yes, IPPG did help. But during that time, also remember, everybody was tired of the Moi era and the Kanu era, right? That's why when you look at even how the elections, how Uhuru lost that election, right? Because he was fronted by Moi. It was terrible. It was a bad loss, but Kenya wanted a fresh start at that time. So going back to all these issues, this selection panel, it's going to be, if we have any steps during their process that we feel is unfair, there are recourses that we can take. During that process, it's also going to be live to the public. There will be public participation. So every Kenyan has a right to come out and say, hey, guess what? This did not go right. And assuming majority of Kenyans, we feel, guess what? The process was not right and it did not follow the law, and we have no recourse. In 2027, we'll have those elections again at the polling station, and we will take these people out.
Okay, Sam. You know, this issue is targeting the 2027 election. We don't want anything to happen, as we have said. If we choose well, because they feel like Ruto to behave like Moi used to behave. So he's putting his people. I mean, I'm already, you know, we are discussing as Kenyans. We are not in opposition. It's only that we are trying.
But we have to state the truth, Dr. Mandi.
I'm already saying that the process, even if we put the rules down, they feel like they need to be listened so that they choose a panel which can select people. We want credible men and women who will conduct election in Kenya. We don't want any fights. I mean, Kenya, we have made progress. Even up to the last election, I think from my side, I will say we have indeed made progress, and we don't want to go back. We want to build on the progress we have. Can we agree on this point that they, Azimio, at some point that they need to be listened to? They need. No,
I don't agree with that.
Let's look at it from another perspective. By the way, because if we may end up disagreeing, which is okay. And when two people are sitting there, they should, in my opinion, disagree if they have to. Kenya, like we said, is made of so many nations and so many political groupings, and these groupings are actually groupings for a reason, and therefore their voices must be heard. And should it be that there was need, and there is actually need for us to be seen to be represented, I think, yes, I can agree with you that we need to have that actually in place. And number two, the fact that I'm going to repeat go back to what my friend just mentioned there. It's not because the two leaders of the executive are actually ridiculous. No, it's not because of that. It's because the church leaders have given them a platform to politic in charge. It's not. I'm not begrudging them. It's the church that has given them a platform to politic in charge. That's why I'm saying they have gone into bed. I'm not criticizing Ruto. I'm saying the church has given him a platform to use. The church will say, no, we cannot. You cannot do that in church. And number three, if we go into another election and know that it's already biased, there's no need for that election, because perception is reality.
Okay.
And if you perceive some reality to be skewed, I'm telling you, that's a recipe for chaos.
So we have talked on this because we need to come to other items.
Let me just say one thing on that, on what Dr. Ndimu has said about perception. This perception is a narrative that's given by any one person and to their followers, and I'm saying this in because from the election we could see the nation is almost divided in half, right, on the political temperatures and how people think politically. That perception, if we truly follow what has been laid down by the legislation, the constitution, and we are true spokesmen and women of the constitution, there should be no perception of ill will, no perception of anything, because we'll say the process was followed. If you have any flaw in the process, bring it up, let's take it to court, let's do whatever we need to do for that perception. But because of the interest of those on top there who are leading us, their personal interest, that's where these perceptions come from.
Okay. Gentlemen, because we are running short of time, let's talk about one of the reasons they are also going is the cost of living is high. They need to be reduced. They need to bring back the food subsidy. The Kenya Kwanza government has been in office for barely 6 months. Looks like the economy of Kenya has the world economy is not doing very well. Even in the United States here, is not doing very well too. Where's the logic here? Right now, why Kenya is having an issue. Number one, they are not dispersing money counties. From November, they are not discounting money to counties. I think if you saw today the chairman of Council of Governors for the Treasury that they have not dispersed the money which was supposed to go to the council, 92.5 billion, has not been taken there. And then the subsidies they removed. Do you think they have there, Dr. Ndim? What's your understanding on that?
Yeah, and you know, Sam mentioned there that the politicians made promises, and when they walked into the office, they found something different, and usually that's how it happens. But as I mentioned to you, perception is the reality. Once you walk into the office and you realize your promises are not likely to be achieved, especially because our president, I'm going to remind you, our president is very good in giving very accurate numbers. He says in 6 months, in 3 months, in 90 days. He's very good in giving those numbers. He's very articulate. And we're going to hold him to account for those days, because most recently, for example, he said in 6 months, a 6 gas cylinder will cost between 300 and 500 shillings. He said it when he's in office. So as a chief executive, you cannot just be pandering and saying things that you know cannot happen. So in my opinion, and you and I know that the government of the United States gives subsidies to those who are unable to and they walk down, they call them, I think, weak. And they walk down to the grocery stores and they buy food. I'm going to begrudge this current administration on 2 counts. Number one, they took away the subsidies for food without any replacement. Number 2, they took the money away and placed it elsewhere, meaning that there was money actually, because some money was budgeted for subsidies was moved elsewhere. And they also took away money from the subsidies in gas and food, and they say there's completely no money. We cannot afford these. But one wonders where they got the same money to increase the parotid government. Where are they getting that money from? How did they get the money to do what they're doing now? For example, remember most recently what they said, and I'm gonna give you some fine details here once I open them up. So, in my opinion, a responsible government should have taken that away after they have found a replacement. They said in 6 months there will be production. They moved money away from the food subsidies and they put it in production, they said, meaning that they were going to purchase fertilizers so that we can produce more. But you know what? Guess what? The fertilizers they promised farmers cannot find them. It's only in 17 counties, and those counties, large-scale farmers are saying, I need 180 bags of fertilizers, but they're only getting 10. So, I mean, can you see what I mean here? Okay. If I were them, and I'm saying this in good faith, what they could have done is they would start removing the subsidies while at the same time increasing production in a very phased way. When you make change has to be very slow and very, very intentional so that you don't have the same hustlers that you wanted to protect in the first place. The same hustlers, he rode on the back of the hustlers to the state house. He has moved the rug under them, and now they cannot find transportation. They can't find food. They're crying more than anybody else.
Sam, you have to
let me respond to this one. And for me, I'm responding with facts. All right, let's respond with facts here. Not hearsay, not political talk. Let's respond with facts. First and foremost, when Kenya Kwanza we came into government, we found there was no money. All right. Number 2, our country, we all agree, has been in debt. Physical deficit it's what has been looming for the last, I would say, the last 5 years during President Uhuru's time. Right. These subsidies, where do subsidies come from? Where does the money of subsidy come from? It's supposed to come from taxes, right? And within our own means, then we figure out how much money do we have, and then we take that money, we pay essential things, and then from the essential things, we're able to go ahead and say, guess what? From this surplus, we want to give subsidies so we can keep bringing down the cost of living. what subsidies were done and how the subsidies were done, that money was borrowed. We borrow money to come and subsidize goods. So we are not even able to live within our means. Okay. When we got to government, the first thing we did is we looked at the subsidies that were being given.
You're on mute.
Did they make sense?
No, wait, let him talk.
So did it make sense? It didn't make sense. So we said the first and foremost, we cannot sustain the level of where these subsidies are going. And majority of the money from the subsidies were going into people's pockets. Remember, 28 days to election, there was a subsidy for Unga to bring Unga from 250 Kenyan shillings to 100 shillings. Very few supermarkets sold that from the first millers who knew we're going to go ahead and get a subsidy and let's start producing. Because there was that conversation going on with Minister Munya, CS Munya, about the money that was going to be given to the millers. Those millers right now, they're all over government saying we were not paid. We need our money back. Majority of the other millers did not even go to it because they didn't have money. So majority of Kenyans still bought unga at 250 Kenyan shillings. Very few supermarkets in Nairobi were selling it at 100, and they found out, guess what? We are now getting paid. We are going back to 250. All right. Today,
so I agree with you.
Today, I want you, Mheshimiwa Omandi, to go ahead and pull up even online, Naivas or even the Carrefour, and see how much unga is costing. Jogo is costing at between 192 to 198 Kenyan shillings without subsidy. Meaning, during all that period of time, the money for subsidy that was stolen, all right, if it was actually put into the subsidies, we would be even way less. But we removed that because we want to be fiscally conservative. We want to live within our means. Let's go to fuel levy. ODM, before the elections, the members of parliament, Raila, went to his ODM people. That time we were opposing the fuel levy.
I want you to summarize a bit because our time is,
yes.
We are only having 20 minutes.
This one I will even summarize it. They voted for the fuel levies, right? We said at that position at time, we did not want fuel levies. We're in office right now, which I'm actually proposing our members of parliament should remove that. But we have not had subsidies towards the fuel. And the fuel has not even gone up that much. Although people are still suffering, I'm not saying people are not feeling it. But the cost of living, if it's going down, although at a slow pace, without the subsidies, and the government just got formed, what will happen now that the rains have started? The other thing of fertilizers, right? By yesterday, all right, the Minister of Agriculture by yesterday came out and said we had, what was it? I had it actually here. We have a 1.2 million Kenyan shillings of fertilizers that has been distributed, which is 5.4 million bags. It just started raining this week in Nairobi and all over the country, right? So we have not even harvested. We have gone to Zambia. We have negotiated for us to have land in Zambia, where because their climate is way favorable than us, where we can continue planting. By April, the first week of April, we have 1.1 million tons of rice that's coming to the country. And then you're telling us, let's go demonstrate because the high cost of living is high. Well, you're not even giving this government a chance. But the real cost is we want to take Ruto out of power so I can be in power. And yet, there's still no money.
Okay. So if I may respond to that, and if you listen to me carefully, I'm not really looking at who is in power or who is not. I'm looking at that hustler who is actually sitting somewhere who has not, he cannot afford the food. And even if it was Raila who was to be in office today, I would say exact same thing because he promised people that he would bring down the cost of living. You and I should be in agreement that people are suffering. People are suffering. And when you tell me that 1.4 million bags of fertilizer is coming, I'm talking about, they said that, hold on a second, they said it in 100 days, this will happen. Now we are at 300 days, almost 300 days, almost a year. It's getting to a year very soon.
Dr. Ndimo, I said it has already been given out. It's not that it's coming.
Okay,
the 5.4 bags have already been given out, and that is fertilizer that's needed for planting. The one that's needed for additional later, that has not come yet. That's why
I'm telling you, if you walk into stores and shops right now in places that I know, they cannot find fertilizers for 3,800 shillings as they promised. That's what I'm talking about. They cannot find. It's going for 6,000 still.
I need to see that any fertilizer that's given by the government that you're going to Serious Board to go get your fertilizer, All right, that fertilizer was going for 3,800. We have given farmers that fertilizer.
Now-
What we were lacking was the
gentlemen,
rains. And in substitution of that, we have
If I may ask you though, you are saying we. Are you in that government?
No, I'm a Kenyan. I'm talking as a Kenyan.
Gentlemen, you need to address me.
I am a Kenyan, so actually I'm a farmer in Kenya. So I'm also affected by this.
Let's look at this. It is about the question of fertilizers. Of course, it's a good. We bring the cost of farming down if we want to achieve reasonable prices. That's okay. But here is the case where the economy is not doing very well. The cost of living has gone up. Many countries they do subsidy. Mr. Nyaga, if you know where the subsidy money went, we have the anti-corruption body, we have investigators. All of those people needs to be brought to book who stole the money. The intention would be good, but if the money ended up somewhere, you see, even here in the United States, a lot of money was given during COVID. People took the money, they thought it's free money. Some of them are now in jail. They are still, the others were jailed even yesterday. So instead of prosecuting people in the public, I would say we want to know that Dr. Ndimu stole billion, which was supposed for subsidy, went to his account. We want to hear people in court. Let us also face on this. But there is a question I'm telling you. This same thing.
Let me answer that question first before you ask me another one. So let me answer you first. That first question is very clear. We saw what COVID money and now people are paying. That is from 2020. In 2023, people are still going to jail, right? We have been in government for 6 months. Number two, we have discovered what has happened in government. Today, I believe the former CS of Treasury, Akuro, has been recalled again to Parliament to go answer more questions, right? These things are revealing themselves. Not only that, all I'm saying is this, all right? Kenya Kwanza government, we have prioritized what we call subsidies for production and not subsidies for consumption, all right? We want to subsidize where we can have production so that the masses and the prices of goods can go down, at the same time giving the farmer the right price for their crops to sustain that economy. And if today unga is down without a subsidy, although it's not where we really want it to be, but it's down without a subsidy, right? Then that means come the rains, and God continue to give us the rains, we go to the harvest. Now we have more crops out there. We have more maize out there. Does that not mean that the price continue going down?
Wait, Dr. Nim. So Sam, your argument is like the one President Trump used to have. He was negotiating with the virus that when summer comes, the virus will go away. No, wait. Let me talk first. Let us be realistic. For immediate action, like the 100 days, it could have been good to put these short-term measures of subsidies, because the one for production, it could have been gradual, and I think that would have saved the country than just eliminating it because somebody was stealing it.
The other thing too, Dr. Mandi, you have to understand in our country, for example, we have what we call cartels. That is a given. Every Kenyan knows we have cartels in every industry, right? During the subsidy era, there were so many cartels for this subsidy money, all right? So when we pulled down the subsidies and said we're not giving subsidies to the millers, we're not giving subsidies for these goods until we organize government, which is actually barely just 6 months. Until we organize government, we have structures in place for us to ensure that the people's money is going to the right places, all right? Unga has continued to come down, okay? In as much as you talk about that, and now I even want to tie a little bit to this mass action because of high cost of living. If we're going to talk about why are these mass actions not there during handshake period? And
so, to answer that question, it's so simple. It's so simple because I think you've taken half more than 75% of the time if you win and we're ending this call.
No. We actually will have a tally. but let me just finish my point. My point is, I understand what Dr. Mandi is saying, that we need to put money for short-term gains and all that. But we have seen we're doing a gradual change because there was no money. That subsidy money, we needed to go borrow more money to bring it back and put in subsidy.
Thank
and
you, Sam. Our time is
today at 192 shillings is better than 250.
Okay, that's okay. But now we are having a mass action on a Monday. And you know, this started in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, Rajapaksa was elected as a president, and he had promised all of these big things. And it's one of the things he wanted not to use fertilizers. They wanted to plant this agricultural policy of organic food. Then rice production in Sri Lanka within 6 months fell by 60%. And the Sri Lankan people were now forced to import this. That is how the Sri Lanka mass movement started, and ended up, they stepped to, see, that is where the mass action ended up in State House, and they ejected the president from office, and they had to resign. So when we are talking here, we might be talking because we understand. The masses in Kenya doesn't understand this. What do you think? Are there other things you need to recommend that we have had this? We don't want this mass action. Is there something else we can do to stop this mass action? Dr.
Yeah, I'll take probably 1 minute or 30 seconds because I'm going to jump off to do something else. Yes, in my opinion, the people's voice should be heard. They should do any protests in a very peaceful way. Their voices should be heard. If it's a protest or if it's a petition they're going to do, let them do it in a very peaceful way. In my opinion, they should not go there to dispose of the administration of Ruto. They should go there demanding that the food prices come down. And you all know that recently also France, we had those similar things where the president was actually pushed into the corner to agree on a certain few things. And I know my friend said that they went to elections the other day and they elected representatives who are their spokespeople. There are times when people cannot speak for others. They rise up, take back their power, and they speak for themselves. And I think, in my opinion, the state should step back, give them a chance. Their voices be heard, and therefore the government should respond in the same way. The government is in power because of these people. If the people are saying do this, I think the government should listen to them, in my opinion.
Yeah, Sam, so we are just in 1 minute.
Let me also talk about it real quick. The first and foremost, Raila and Azimio has not come out and said what is the end goal of this mass action on Monday. If it's cost of living to go down, does it need it done there? Then that has not happened. So he has not told us that. We've just heard we need to take Ruto out of office. Then what happens if Ruto is out of office, right? Who gets in office? It's very simple. He just wants to grab power by by the masses to come in. This is very simple. We're saying people can protest, people can not protest but demonstrate. People can go to the streets, picket. They can bring dialogue and all that. When we are even talking about dialogue, what are we going to dialogue about? High cost of living. It's very simple. Raila sit down. He has a platform. Raila has a platform in our country, right? Go there, say, I need the government. These are my suggestions of what the government should do. Do A, B, C, D. By my calculation, the cost of unga will be 100 Kenyan shillings, period. And then if we don't do it, then you can hold us accountable to it. But you're telling us, bring back subsidies. The subsidies when you are in government that you did, and the money got lost with it. Even 2 days to election, we hear money was still getting out, going to people's pocket. That are actually financing this mass action. And the other thing too, and this is very clear, we will see a big difference in our government, because for us, we say
our time is over.
I know our time is over, but all I need, let's do that. I have alternatives for this thing. The first alternative is parliament. It depends. It goes ahead and talks about budget. It can balance the budget. It can figure out how, if subsidies are needed, fuel levies can be taken out. That's one. Number two, we have counties that we have MCAs there. They can figure out a lot. They've been elected too with people. And then we also have we also have this thing that we're talking about, we need to grab our power. If we're grabbing our power back, then all the people we elected, they need to all resign, and then we go and be a banana republic out there. But the Kenyan government, and this is what I'll repeat for those who will go to Mandamano on Monday, do it peacefully is your right. But pia jua mkono wa serikali ni mrefu. If you try to cause any trouble, try to make anybody, and you know they say if we find your shop is open, that you will tell us why, right? Raila declaring that as a public holiday is who? Number one, is against the constitution.
Okay. So
You need more time.